Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the History of Value podcast with your host, Jacob Berman, and frequent guest, Dr. Robert M. Price. And today we're going to be talking about the Apocalypse of Elijah. Many scholars will say that the Apocalypse of Elijah clearly, if you read the text, it clearly postdates the war. It talks about the wrath of God coming upon the Jews, plagues, wars everywhere, the man of lawlessness. It even talks about the millennial reign of Christ. Elements that is found in 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, and the book of Revelation. But for some reason, 1 Thessalonians gets special treatment when it talks about anything like it. And they say it has to be pre-war, before AD 66. But yet when the Apocalypse of Elijah makes the same statements that 1 Thessalonians makes, is post-war. What is interesting is there is church father commentary on the matter. It was like Jerome claiming that Paul made use of the Apocalypse of Elijah. And I think that could work if 1 and 2 Thessalonians are drawing on the language of the Apocalypse. In either way, their language are identical. And since they say 2 Thessalonians is a forgery and it's post-war, and the Apocalypse of Elijah makes similar statements to 2 Thessalonians, so it must be post-war. So why is 1 Thessalonians getting special treatment? Oh, but when the authentic Paul says it, it must be pre-war.
Is it possible that Jerome believed this was actually written by the prophet Elijah and was a real long distance prediction?
I'm not sure. He's not too specific. He just passingly says that Paul used this text, but he doesn't talk about specifically if he thinks Elijah actually wrote it or not. I don't think, but I can find out right now because I do have it on Kindle, as I was telling you before the recording, and in which he makes this statement. I'm accessing it right now. I just got to go to the library. There it is. Okay. I'm opening it right now. What's interesting is Origen says that Paul's using the Apocryphon of Isaiah, but Jerome says he's using the Apocryphon of Elijah.
What is the Isaiah text? Is that supposed to be one that we have, like the martyrdom and ascension of Isaiah, or something else?
Yeah, I think they're talking about the ascension of Isaiah. Yeah. That's my suspicion. Yeah.
Let's see. The intro to the Apocalypse of Elijah in Sparks's Old Testament Apocrypha collection says about our Coptic apocalypse, 2 things may be said with little fear of contradiction. 1, it is of some respectable antiquity, and 2, if not entirely Christian in origin, whatever Jewish sources it may have had have been so thoroughly Christianized as to be virtually unrecognizable. And that would seem to be the case. It looks like it's just based on Thessalonians and Revelations. Then he says it is possible to discount some of the contacts with Revelation, such as they shall neither hunger nor shall they thirst, or they will give them the right to eat from the tree of life and to wear white garments, as no more than part of the common stock in trade of apocalyptic literature, whether Jewish or Christian. But it is not so easy to apply this explanation to the description of the Antichrist as the son of perdition and the lawless one, and so on and so on. They suggest some of it comes from Matthew. But I sure wouldn't be surprised if Jerome was reading this and just believed that, oh yeah, I guess this was written by Elijah. Uh, though he was, I believe, properly skeptical about whether the Epistle of James was written by James the Just, but rather was, but that it was supposed to be, that somebody wrote this in homage to James's memory or something. And but this seems like an odd thing, but it would have been in his interest to say, aha, this was legitimate Christian type prophecy from way back there in the Old Testament, the same sort of thing that the Book of Mormon envisions, that these people knew all about the coming of Christ hundreds of years in advance, and so that the specifics that match New Testament stuff, they'd say, well, you just must have gotten it from the true prophecy of the ancient Elijah. But of course, that's impossible for us. And the idea that it's really about the destruction of Jerusalem, though it's phrased as if you got Assyria in here and Persia and all that. It's possible that that's like Fourth Ezra, which pretends to be talking about the aftermath of the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem, but seems actually to be talking about the Roman destruction. It could be the same sort of double entendre thing. But James may not, Jerome may not have grasped that. Very puzzling. I noticed that we've got this spinning out here of what the Antichrist meant, so that he's largely paralleled with Jesus in the Gospels, but he's a fake imitation. He does everything Jesus did, but raised the dead for some reason. But he did loads of this other stuff, and so people naturally thought, "Oh, well, it's Jesus, all right." That, like, you don't get that impression from anything in Revelation or Thessalonians. Those are very modest in comparison, where he's just a false messiah or an end time tyrant. Gregory Jenks calls him the end tyrant, I think. This is much more of a Christian speculation kind of a thing, amplifying it. And it's interesting if Jerome already took that to be the truth about what would happen with the Antichrist, and if he thought Paul was using this, but just making passing allusions to it, it sort of shows how they were backdating this speculation that is much more elaborate even than the Book of Revelation's view of the beast. And he's got Enoch and Elijah as the two witnesses implicitly. Bousset, in his book, the Antichrist Legend, I think that's his. Yeah, he says that he thinks the original version of the two witnesses prophecy did not envision Moses and Elijah, but rather Enoch and Elijah. And other people, because this is not the only one of these books that makes the other one Enoch. And I guess the theory was, if you didn't accept that as an earlier version, it would be because you figured, well, Enoch and Elijah both explicitly are said to have ascended into heaven, so they would come back, and here was their chance to meet the fate of all flesh, to die, though they rise. But with Moses, it doesn't say that, but of course, that was commonly believed about Moses anyhow, so that doesn't strike me as all that cogent. And the thing with the plagues, inflicting plagues, I don't think that fits Enoch very well. That's got to be Mo. But
Yeah. So what Jerome specifically says is that some claim that Paul made use of the Apocryphon of Isaiah, but he was actually using the Apocryphon of Elijah.
Now, which did Origen say?
That Paul used the Apocryphon of Isaiah.
It was, now, which one said he used this Apocryphon of Isaiah? I'm confused there.
Origen of Alexandria.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And Jerome is referring to that, but rejecting it in favor of the Apocalypse of Elijah. Is that right?
Right. Here it is. I finally found exactly where Jerome states this. It's in letter 57. And he states, some writers on this passage, he's talking about 1 Corinthians 2, 8-9. Some writers on this passage betake themselves to the ravings of the apocryphal books and assert that the quotation comes from the revelation of Elijah. Whereas the truth is that it is found in Isaiah according to the Hebrew text. Okay, yeah, so I got that in reverse. He's claiming that it did not come from the apocalypse. That it did not come from the revelation of Elijah. He says it comes from Isaiah.
The canonical Isaiah.
No, the Apocryphon. Sorry.
Because he speaks of these Apocrypha as ravings.
Yeah, actually, what I thought was a mistake is actually correct. He is saying it came from Isaiah according to the Hebrew text. He says, since the beginning of the world, men have not heard, nor perceived by the ear, neither by the ear, neither has the eye seen. Let me reread that. Nor perceived by the ear, neither has the eye seen, O God, beside you, what you have prepared for them that wait for you.
Yeah, so let me just see if I have a note here that sends me over to Isaiah 29:14, I think. No, wait, that's not it. That can't be. Well, it sure would be handy if I had memorized the whole Bible, but that ain't gonna happen.
Take your time, it's all good. No, I'm having a hard time finding some stuff here too.
These thin Bible pages drive you nuts. Just cut that page. Yeah, two. Isaiah 64:4. Isaiah 64:4. Yeah, let's see.
Now there are scholar. Oh, go ahead.
Isaiah 64:4. From of old, no one has heard or perceived by the ear. No eye has seen a God besides thee, who works for those who wait for him. And then 65:17. I say, for behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former things shall not be remembered or come to mind. Well, that's not all that close.
Yeah, there are some authors that think that, or there are some scholars that think that Origin is well, they claim that Origin says that Paul uses the Apocalypse of Elijah, and I've been trying to find where Origin states that. The only text I could find is that he says that he uses the Apocryphon of Isaiah. So I don't know why scholars say that Origin claims that Paul used the Apocalypse of Elijah. I would love to find it. I try to look for the references. I mean, and I go look at the reference, and I don't see it there. So I don't know what the deal is.
Baffling. Oh. I'm sure there are close parallels to this somewhere in the New Testament. Ephesians 3 and 5. Let's see. And maybe that'll lead us a merry chase here. Ephesians 3. And this is not that close either. How the mystery was made known to me by revelation, as I have written briefly. Verse 5, which was not the mystery of Christ, which was not made known to the sons of men in other generations, as it has now been revealed to his holy apostles and prophets by the Spirit. I think there's something in the Acts of Peter where on the cross he makes some reference to this, and I think in the Gospel of Thomas also, but who knows where they got it. Yeah, and of course he could. Yeah, Paul is referring to this. It does imply, or whoever is writing Thessalonians, it would mean he's writing a good bit after the destruction of Jerusalem. I think you've already got that in Romans, though, and it says, "Let their table be a snare to them." Well, what table? I would think that means the Jerusalem temple altar, and the assurance that Jews have rejected Christianity, even if it's only temporary. That seemed to me to be really anachronistic. If Colossians, the gospel has been preached in the world. What? I mean, even the limited idea of what the world was, like the Roman Empire, maybe, that seems very strange. I mean, that almost sounds late. Like, I've been written in the 19th century. And yeah, it's very puzzling.
Yeah, but I think what the audience will get from this is that if you look at the apocalyptic theme and the apocalypse of Elijah, and if you look at 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, Revelation, the bias can be seen clearly. That scholars will give an early date to 1 Thessalonians. But when the Apocalypse of Elijah states similar things, for some reason, they're okay with dating that later. And the bias.
Yeah.
then the bias is revealed. Go ahead.
James Barr, in his great book Fundamentalism, said, is it naturalistic presuppositions, specifically a refusal to believe in the possibility of prophecy? Is that why Old Testament critics say that, like, the Olivet Discourse about the destruction of Jerusalem must be a prediction after the fact? No, look, it's just consistency, because when we read something like Fourth Ezra or this, it's pretty obvious when it's because it's already happened. And then when it veers off into the Ark of the Covenant, then that's where that shows us when the thing must have been written. It's a genuine but false prediction by the writer. He says, are we supposed to suspend this methodology when it comes to canonical scripture? I don't think so. I mean, you're not believing in the historical method, etc. If you establish a kind of rood screen of sacred hermeneutics, you can't do that. You have to interpret it as you would any uninspired text. I mean, even if you think it's inspired, it's a human text. You got to read it like all the other ones, and then you'll take it more seriously because of the inspiration you believe in. But I think that's another, what you just said is another example. Oh, wait a minute, it can't be.
So yeah, the Apocalypse of Elijah, I need to, at some point in the future, I like to dig into the parallels more specifically. But today, we didn't focus way too much on it because I wanted to focus more on well, we did focus on it somewhat because instead of First Corinthians, because that didn't go well, 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians did reveal tons of parallels to the Apocalypse of Elijah, and Revelation did too. And that really shows the reader that the early dating for 1 Thessalonians doesn't really make sense. It has the same it has an identical apocalyptic structure, at least, to the Apocalypse of Elijah. So why date that to the 50s?
Well, some point out that Thessalonians and Revelation have a lot in common with the Olivet Discourse or Mark of Apocalypse.
It does.
And given that, it does make you wonder if perhaps it's not a question of dependence of one of these texts on another, but rather that there was a kind of a common topic that they're all referring to in some way.
Even with even with that argument, you still have to put it post-war for that to make sense.
Yeah.
You kind of get the same conclusion either way.
Yeah.
Point.
And I think James A.T. said that.
James A.T. what? You broke up there.
Oh, actually, John A.T. Robinson. I think in his book Jesus and His Coming, I believe he points out that the what was this? It's all discernibly later material, at least in Matthew 24, that parallels the stuff in Thessalonians, implying that if there is an actual Jesus authored apocalypse, that it's you got to dig it out from the version of it, and that the later material, the additional material that matches the epistles, shows it's from the early church, not from Jesus. kind of like when they say that the interpretation of the parable of the sower in Mark uses language we find elsewhere only in the Pauline Epistles, like the sower sows the word and stuff like this. But it's a tricky business because it kind of depends on what criteria you're using to isolate what you think was the original Jesus material in Synoptic Apocalypse. And that's pretty tough because almost a sentence of it sounds an awful lot this or that Old Testament passage.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It sure does. Makes a lot of sense to me.
There's a whole movement, I guess, in the 70s and 80s, the narrative criticism of the Gospels, where it seems like because they said, well, for too long we've looked at the Gospels as a quarry in which to dig for the authentic teaching of Jesus, but why don't we shift the focus Gospels as literary works? And of course, there is a real good point to that, but it sort of enabled them to sidestep the whole question. Jesus, because often they would cheat at the punchline and say that, like Hans Fry, for instance, in Eclipse of Biblical Narrative, if I remember correctly, he wound up saying that that all right, it's a finished narrative of Jesus that has such an impact on us, and it wouldn't really have that impact if it weren't based on reality. Whoa, wait a minute here. That seems to be a hermeneutic of evasion. And unless they're saying, okay, we give up, there's no way what Jesus said or did, if anything, but we do have the Gospels. Now, I can agree with that. Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind becoming a kind of where you say, Bultmann, we don't know the first thing about Jesus, the historical Jesus, though he later influence of
you broke up somewhat there. Like you were saying, if you don't mind what?
Being a de facto mythicist.
Oh, okay. Other than that, I pretty much, yeah. Other than that, I heard pretty much everything else you said. Yeah.
Yeah, and well, Bultmann eventually, like Born-Kamm, Käsemann, and others of his said, no, we can know something basically about the teaching of Jesus, and possibly under their influence, Jesus does outline a reasonably substantial deposit of teaching that he thinks comes from Jesus. But you get a whole different view of it in his, I think, earlier book, The History of the Synoptic Tradition, where one saying and other story is checked off the list, like, oh no, this is Hellenistic preaching, et cetera, this is rabbinic debating. I just love it's more lived long enough to fathom, but from what I know about all this stuff, the criticism and so on, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
The kindred question, when there are parallels with Gospels and the epistle in First and Second Thessalonians, is that because the Gospel writers epistles in front of them, like David Oliver Smith and I think Richard Purvo, others said, yeah, they think that the Gospels used. Oh no, I'm sorry. Purvo says that Acts knew and used the epistles, but Smith says Gospel writers might have known them, and he long list of parallels that he thinks are close enough to suggest that indeed earlier the Gospels must be lifting stuff from him. And I find the parallels not to be quite so not to be that compelling. My view is a kind of a cousin to that one, and this is me by me. These similar statements appear in the epistles, similarly to gospel sayings, not gospels, but rather because gospel writers knew the epistle, yes, but decided to make some of those sayings into, well, they might have known the sayings, but whether correctly or not, but didn't know where they came from, and eventually said, who said that again? I mean, I once Bible talk show, kind of like the Bible, years ago, and said, where does the Bible say neither borrower nor lender be? And our host was he's hunting around through his concordance, and I can't find it. And I was trying to get through the switchboard to say it's from well, people often those who help themselves, as the Bible says. It doesn't say that. Or Jesus said a penny saved is a penny earned. No, he didn't. And so that may have happened. People attributed maybe rabbinic or philosophical or other sayings, and it's when you say, well, it has to be from the New Testament, that's another version of that fallacy that there are only 5 ancient words, so everything must have shaded around between them.
Hello viewers, thanks for watching this video from the History Valley YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and if any of you wish to further support this channel, please consider checking out this channel's Patreon page and becoming a patron, and or donate through PayPal or through Super Chat during a live stream. Thank you.